Welcome back to Money Matters Radio. I'm Michael Henderson, and we're taking calls from listeners sharing their real-life experiences with life insurance strategies. Today, we're particularly focused on the buy term and invest the difference approach that's been promoted by so many financial educators. We've heard some mixed results so far, and I think our next caller really illustrates why this topic is so important. Let me bring in Jonathan from Pennsylvania. Jonathan, you're on the air.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. I've been listening to your show for years, and when I heard today's topic, I knew I had to share what happened with my father.
Please, go ahead, Jonathan. What's your story?
Well, back in 1998, my dad was 45 years old and had a whole life insurance policy. He went to a Primerica agent who convinced him to cash in that whole life policy and follow the buy term and invest the difference strategy. At the time, it sounded brilliant.
That was right at the height of the dot-com boom, wasn't it? What specifically did your father do?
Exactly. He took about $10,000 from the cash value of his whole life policy, bought a 20-year term policy through Primerica, and invested that money in their mutual funds. The agent showed him all these projections about how much better off he'd be investing in the stock market instead of wasting money on whole life insurance.
And I'm guessing this didn't work out as planned?
Michael, it was a disaster. My dad invested in two of their funds, SOPAX and SBLGX, both with 5% front-load fees. So right off the bat, he only had $9,500 actually working for him. Then there were the annual expense ratios of over 1% each year.
So the fees were eating into his returns from day one. What happened with the investment performance?
This is where it gets really painful, Michael. From 1998 to 2008, that's 11 years. Between the dot-com crash and the financial crisis, his investment barely grew at all. After all the fees and the market volatility, his $10,000 was worth maybe $8,200 by 2008.
Oh no. And what about the life insurance side?
That's where it gets worse. His 20-year term policy expired in 2018 when he was 65. By then, he had developed diabetes and high blood pressure. When he tried to renew, the premiums were astronomical. We're talking about $800 a month for the same coverage that used to cost him $150. He simply couldn't afford it.
So he lost his life insurance coverage right when health issues made new coverage unaffordable. That's exactly the trap many people fall into.
Exactly. And here's the real kicker, Michael. My dad passed away in 2020 at age 67. We inherited that mutual fund account, which by then was worth about $9,100. But because it wasn't life insurance proceeds, we had to deal with capital gains taxes on any growth, plus we'd been paying taxes on dividends and capital gains distributions for years.
So, after 22 years, fees, taxes, and market volatility, the family ended up with less than the original $10,000 investment and no life insurance benefit.
That's right. If he'd kept that original whole life policy, we would have received a tax-free death benefit. Instead, we got a taxable mutual fund account worth less than he originally invested, and our family had no life insurance protection when we needed it most.
Sincerely, Jonathan, I'm so sorry for your loss, and thank you for sharing this cautionary tale. It really highlights how the buy term and invest the difference strategy can go wrong when you factor in real-world fees, taxes, and market volatility.
I just want people to understand that those projections they show you assume everything goes perfectly. In reality, life is messy, markets crash, and you might not be able to renew that term policy when you need it most.
Absolutely. Thank you for that important perspective, Jonathan. Now, I want to balance this with another caller who has a different experience. Let's go to Dale from Florida. Dale, you're on Money Matters Radio.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me on. That was a tough story to hear from Jonathan, and my heart goes out to him and his family.
Yeah, thanks for calling in, Dale. Now, I understand you have a different experience to share with us about life insurance strategies?
That's right, Michael. I want to be clear up front. I'm not calling to dispute Jonathan's experience or to promote any particular strategy. What works for one person doesn't work for everyone. But I did want to share how I've been able to use life insurance in some creative ways that have worked well for my situation.
Excellent. And Dale, can you give our listeners a bit of background about yourself?
Sure. I'm in real estate development and private equity finance here in Florida, so I'm constantly looking at different ways to use financial tools and leverage to make investments and grow wealth. I don't have any affiliation with insurance companies. This is just what's worked for me personally.
All right. So tell us about your approach to life insurance.
Well, Michael, I'll be honest, I normally don't follow the traditional advice you hear from most financial gurus. I actually use life insurance in very creative ways as part of my investment strategy.
That sounds fascinating, Dale. Can you walk us through exactly how you use life insurance as an investment tool?
Absolutely, Michael. Let me break this down for you and your listeners, because I think this might surprise some people who think of life insurance as just a death benefit.
For the conversation, I don't have any questions. I normally use, I'm in real estate development and private equity finance. So I use life insurance in very creative ways. I do dump money into a life insurance policy, and then, of course, I borrow that money out. My money stays in that compound interest environment. I normally use an IUL. Whole life to me is a good tool, but it's just too fee rich for my liking, and the flexibility is not what I normally do. Because typically, what I do is I will, for instance, I'll buy real estate and I'll borrow maybe the down payment out of that, so to speak, and I make it by probably anywhere from probably 7, 8, 9% interest, compound, borrowing at 4 or 5. So I'm making a little bit of a delta there, knowing that in the next 90 to 120 days, I get my money back out of it on the refi and then put the money back into the policy, rinse and repeat. And so I kind of use my life insurance that way. And when I'm actually making an investment into a company, a growth company, typically I may dump some money into a life insurance policy. And of course, it's structured in certain ways, which my professional does for me. And I make the investment to that firm, which is great. And I'll probably be via debt or equity, or a debt component with equity in it as well, knowing that in the next 12 months or 11 months, I get my money right back out, which is fine. And then I rinse and repeat that whole thing as well. I'm a big proponent of leveraging someone else's cash, not my own, to be able to make investments. That's what I normally do with my stuff.